Vote is ordered. The members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment by Paul Brown of Georgia would eliminate funding provided for the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Loan Program. Another 2-minute vote. 2 more amendments to be considered to be voted on, and then the House will resume consideration of amendments to the 2012 Energy and Water Programs Bill, spending bill for 2012. So 2 more votes after this one. In about an hour and 15 minutes at the White House, President Obama will once again meet with congressional leaders on the debt and deficit discussions. Already today we've heard from Leader Pelosi, Republican leadership as well, and we have those news briefings on our website, cspan.org, and we're carrying live right now, as a matter of fact, the news conference with a couple of freshman senators. Ron Johnson of Wisconsin is one of them, and they are sending a letter to President Obama regarding Social Security checks and the debt limit. That briefing is underway. We are carrying it for you live right now at cspan.org.
On this vote, the yeas are 114, the nays are 309. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment offered by the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Shimkus of Illinois.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote will stand and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. The members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
The amendment by John Shimkus of Illinois would increase funding in the Energy and Water Spending Bill, increase the funding for the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Repository by $10 million.
are 297. The nays are 130. The amendment is agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 47, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 47, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
The last amendment vote in this series, an amendment to the $31 billion energy and water spending bill for 2012. Paul Brown's amendment would eliminate funding, $250,000 provided for the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission. Again, this is the last vote in this series, and we expect the House will continue on with more amendment consideration to the energy and water spending bill. As you probably know, we've covered a number of events from the UK, from UK Parliament, on some of the hearings, etc., surrounding the British phone hacking scandal. Well, the FBI reports this afternoon that they are going to probe allegations into Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation, that they hacked into the phone records of victims of the September 11th attacks, the FBI said today. And just to let you know some of our coverage plans as well, next Tuesday, the British House of Commons will hold a hearing on the phone hacking scandal. Among the witnesses there will be the chairman and CEO of News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch, his son James Murdoch, the chairman and chief executive of News Corp International, and Rebecca Brooks, the chief executive of News International. We will have that hearing for you live next Tuesday, July 19th at 9:30 Eastern. That'll be carried live on C-SPAN 3, online as well at cspan.org and C-SPAN Radio.
On this vote, the yeas are 187, the nays are 239. The amendment is not agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion to rise. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union, having under consideration H.R. 2354, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chairman of the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union reports that the committee has The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, I write to inform you that I have notified Chairman Bonner and Ranking Member Sanchez of my resignation from the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives. It is because of my high regard for the Ethics Committee and its vital nonpartisan role in enforcing the standards of official conduct in the House of Representatives that I make this decision. Having recently announced my candidacy for the United States Senate, I want to ensure my status as a candidate for higher office does not in any way cause the work of the Ethics Committee to become fodder for politics or partisanship. It has been a privilege and an honor to serve on this committee. Signed sincerely, Maisie K. Hirono.
Without objection, the resignation is accepted. For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut rise?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Democratic Caucus, I send to the desk a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 350, resolved that the following named member be and is hereby elected to the following standing committee of the House of Representatives.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The House will be in order. Members, please take your conversation elsewhere. Take a seat. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that during further consideration of H.R. 2354 in the Committee of the Whole, pursuant to House Resolution 337, no further amendments to the bill may be offered except pro forma amendments offered at any point in the reading by the chair or ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees for the purpose of debate. Amendments printed in the Congressional Record and numbered 21, 26, 27, 53, 63, 66, 67, 70, 75, 76, 80, and 81. An amendment by Mrs. Adams regarding limiting funds for a Department of Energy website that disseminates information regarding energy efficiency and educational programs to children or adolescents. Two amendments by Mrs. Blackburn regarding across-the-board cuts. An amendment by Mr. Brown regarding limiting funds for certain programs, projects, or activities in energy program science. Two amendments by Ms. Capps regarding limiting funds for the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant. Amendment by Mr. Cohen regarding funding levels for the solar energy program. Amendment by Mr. Denham regarding limiting funds to implement Section 10011B of Public Law 111-11. Amendment by Mr. Engel regarding limiting funds for lease or purchase of new light-duty vehicles. An amendment by Ms. Issue regarding limiting funds for contracts with business entities that do not disclose political expenditures. An amendment by Mr. Flake regarding limiting funds for advanced research projects, agencies, energy. Amendment by Mr. Flake regarding limiting funds for fossil energy research and development. Amendments by Mr. Frelinghuysen regarding funding levels. Amendment by Mr. Gossler regarding the Davis-Bacon Act. Amendment by Mr. Graves regarding limiting funds to be used in contravention of the 2006 Missouri River Master Manual. Amendment by Mr. Hastings of Florida regarding limiting funds to be used in contravention of Executive Order number 12898. Amendment by Mr. Hastings of Washington regarding limiting funds for the McNary Shoreline Management Plan. Amendment by Mr. Hastings of Washington regarding limiting funds for the Office of Nuclear Security. Amendment by Mr. Hastings of Washington regarding limiting funds for Federal Energy Regulatory Commission project number 2342. Amendment by Ms. Jackson Lee regarding limiting funds to be used in the contravention of the Department of Energy Organization Act. An amendment by Ms. Kaptur regarding funding for energy efficiency and renewable energy. Amendment by Mr. Lukenmeyer regarding the study pursuant to 5018A1 of the Water Resources Development Act of 2007. Amendment by Mr. Rohrabacher regarding limiting funds for loan guarantees for carbon capture and sequestration. Amendment by Mr. Rohrabacher regarding 10% loan guarantee funds for non-water advanced nuclear reactors. Amendment by Mr. Rohrbacher regarding loan guarantees for carbon capture and sequestration projects not exceeding funds for the non-water advanced nuclear reactor loan guarantees. Amendment by Mr. Richmond or Mrs. Scalise regarding funding for the Corps of Engineers construction. Amendment by Mr. Sherman regarding limiting funds for international activities at the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. And further, that each such amendment may be offered only by the member named in this request or a designee, or by the member who caused it to be printed in the congressional record, or a designee, shall not be subject to amendment except that the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or a respective designee each may offer one pro forma amendment for the purpose of debate and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. And further, that each amendment shall be debatable for 10 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent. And further, that an amendment shall be considered to fit the description stated in this request if it addresses in whole or in part the object described.
Is there objections? Without objection, so ordered. House Resolution 337 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union in further consideration of H.R. 2334. Will the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Dole, kindly resume the chair?
The Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 2354, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill making appropriations for energy and water development and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes.
When the Committee of the Whole rose earlier today, the bill had been read through page 62, line 2. Pursuant to the order of the House of today, no further amendment may be offered except those specified in the previous order, which is at the desk. What purposes does the gentleman from Oklahoma rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 26, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Cole of Oklahoma.
Pursuant to the order of the House of today, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in April, a draft executive order was circulated that would force companies, as a condition of applying for a federal contract, to disclose all federal campaign contributions. In my opinion, if implemented, this executive order would lead to a significant politicization of the federal procurement process. Instead of judging companies on the basis of their past work performance, their demonstrated ability to do the job, or their price, we would actually introduce potentially the element of their political participation and contributions and activities into the consideration process. This executive order would not, in fact, lead to more objectivity in the evaluation process. It would instead chill the constitutionally protected right of people to donate politically to whatever candidate or cause or political party they choose to. And frankly, those very same people would fear repercussion to their bottom line, as frankly I'm sure this executive order intends to do. The draft order claims that these burdensome and intrusive disclosure requirements are necessary to ensure that contracting decisions are, quote, deliver the best value to the taxpayer and are free from undue influence of extraneous factors such as political activity or political favoritism. If one accepts this rationale, and I certainly don't, then delivering the, quote, best value to the taxpayer would require such disclosure from anyone receiving federal dollars. This executive order would not apply to federal employee unions that negotiate with the government to provide billions of dollars of benefits to their members, nor would it apply to many nonprofits that receive federal grants, many of whom have strong political agendas of their own. My amendment would prevent any funds from this act going towards the implementation of any rule, regulation, or executive order regarding political contributions that takes effect on or after the date of the enactment of the act. It's important to recognize, Mr. Chairman, my bill does not change federal campaign law in any way, does not change the current disclosure requirements. My amendment's already been agreed to on 3 previous pieces of legislation: the Defense Authorization Bill for FY 2012, the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, and also the Defense Appropriations Bill. Mr. Chairman, pay to play has no place in federal contracting process. Requiring the disclosure of campaign contributions for government contract, in my opinion, does just that. Congress considered the proposed executive order, something like it, during the 111th Congress as part of the Disclosure Act and rejected it. This executive order is a backdoor attempt to implement the Disclose Act by executive fiat. For those reasons, Mr. Chairman, I urge the adoption of the amendment and reserve the balance of my time. Oh, certainly yield time.
Mr. Chairman, I'd rise to support the amendment. The Department of Energy relies heavily on a dedicated contractor workforce to manage and operate our national laboratories. Therefore, such an executive order would impact nearly every program at the Department of Energy. I do not support the amendment, and I urge a yes vote on the gentleman from Oklahoma's amendment, a member of our committee. And I yield back to you, sir.
Thank you. Reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim the time in opposition.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I rise once again in strong opposition to Representative Cole's amendment to block transparency and disclosure for taxpayers. That's what this issue is about. Now, it is with continuing curiosity that when I listened to the gentleman, Mr. Cole, present his view, if in fact you believe in disclosure, bring a bill to the floor. The reason that the House has passed what you keep offering is the House is not presented with an opposing view because my amendment is continually blocked and not accepted to be debated on the floor. Look, what this is about is the following. There are businesses, large and small, that receive billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars for services and products in doing business with the federal government. In return for this public money, they should have the obligation, which is not burdensome, to simply disclose how they use it. That's all this is. When they spend it in our elections, they know it, the recipients know it, but the taxpayers don't know it. That's one hell of a deal for those that want to keep it in a dark corner. It's a great deal for them. The American people have spoken clearly. Last year, a CBS New York Times poll found that 92% of the American people support requiring campaigns, independent groups, businesses to disclose how much money they've raised, where it came from, and how it was used. I'm going to offer my own amendment, again, for the 4th time, to require the disclosure, which Representative Cole's amendment forbids. And I expect once again that the majority is going to block it. It's an unfortunate turnaround, I think, from just a few years ago when Republicans led the fight for disclosure. They were for it before they decided to be against it. Does that tagline ring some bells for you? They were thinking that it would be better than restricting contributions. That was the thinking at the time. But now that the Supreme Court allows unlimited corporate spending, they're against any restrictions whatsoever. We should oppose any amendments that are designed to keep the public less informed rather than more informed about what happens with their tax dollars. That's what this is about. Now, the majority has made a big deal about and talk incessantly about spending. What about this spending? Does this not mean something in terms of the federal government and the taxpayers? I think with public dollars comes public responsibility. This does not present any constitutional issues, no freedom of speech issues. It is not burdensome. It is simply disclosure. So if you want to stand with the uber lobbyists who are representing lobbyists in support of Mr. Cole's amendment, hey, be my guest. I didn't come to Congress to do that. I think that the President's executive order is sensible. I think it should be put into place. And I think that any legislation brought to this floor to prevent that from happening is really on the wrong side of history. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just remind my friend from California that when Republicans brought disclosure, they didn't link it to the contracting process, which this potential executive order does. I think that's out of bounds. I'd also remind my friend the Democrats opposed that, and when Democrats were in the majority, and overwhelmingly in the majority, they failed to act legislation similar to what she suggests in the Disclose Act. So I think this is something that this legislative body's looked at. My friend from California wants to introduce a bill, do this, that's perfectly appropriate to do it, but doing it in the context of the contracting process is simply wrong. People that are submitting bids will somehow think inevitably that they will be helped or hurt by their political activity. That has no basis in judging the quality of a bid for a federal contract. In addition, frankly, my friends have never wanted to apply that same standard to labor unions or to affiliated groups applying for federal dollars. I would actually agree with them on that. I don't think it has any place in disclosure in those areas either. There's a place to do this and there's a place not to do it. Doing it on a contract is inevitably meant to try and use the federal dollars to impact one way or the other what groups do politically. That's wrong. We shouldn't allow it, and we should never, never risk politicizing the procurement process. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time.
How much time do I have left, Mr. Chairman?
Gentlelady has 1 minute.
I would yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews, the remainder of my time.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
I thank my friend for yielding. I thank the chairman. I would say to my friend from Oklahoma through the chair that he makes a very compelling case. I agree with him. I think that these secret groups that are funding massive, usually negative ad campaigns against people running for office should be held to exactly the same standard labor unions are held under present law. If a labor union uses dues money or PAC money or any money to advocate for or against a candidate or a cause, they must disclose it to the public and to their members. That is precisely the principle that Ms. Eshoo is standing for, and I'm proud to stand with her. If you really believe in something that you say, then you shouldn't be ashamed to let everyone know that you said it. If you really believe that what you're advocating is right for the country, then you ought to let everyone know that you said it. It's a simple principle of disclosure. It is something that I think is long overdue. Let's not have anybody hide in the shadows of the American political process.
The time has expired. The gentleman from Oklahoma.
I would just urge the body to support the amendment. I would disagree with my friend. Sham groups are quite often formed that labor unions are underneath, but that's another debate for another day. Let's just keep outside money out of the procurement process. With that, I yield back and urge the adoption of the amendment.
The gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman?
Last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Sure, appreciate the recognition. I rise in strong opposition to the gentleman's amendment and join with my colleague from California and New Jersey in their opposition. The amendment isn't a legislative attempt to circumvent a draft executive order which would provide for increased disclosure of the political contributions of government contractors, especially contributions given to third-party entities. The argument is made that companies should not disclose more information because people in power would misuse that information to retaliate against them. Using that logic, all campaign disclosures are bad. Government contractors already disclose contributions and expenditures by their PACs and those who contribute them. By extension, we ought to take that law and ensure that the voters of this country are protected so that they also know what those corporations are doing with their money as far as involvement in the electoral process. The provisions as drafted are, I think, very good. The information is required to be provided, and the executive order that the amendment would circumvent enhances the quality of information that people and citizens ought to have before they go to the polls. Disclosure is good, and for that reason I rise again in strong opposition to the gentleman's amendment and would yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oklahoma. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
I would ask for a recorded vote on that.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oklahoma will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Eshoo of California. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available in this act may be used to enter into a contract with a corporation or other business entity that does not disclose its political expenditures.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
A point of order on the gentlewoman's amendment.
Gentleman reserves a point of order. Pursuant to the order of the House of today, the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Eshoo and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise for the 4th time this year to call for transparency in our political system. I maintain the view shared by the overwhelming majority of the American people that transparency in the use of our tax dollars is absolutely critical. There are thousands of companies who do business with the federal government receiving billions of public dollars for their services and their products. Our constituents deserve to know whether they spend any of these dollars to influence our elections. And my amendment will accomplish this, and I once again urge my colleagues to support it. Now, some say, as we just heard a few moments ago, that this disclosure requirement will politicize the procurement process. It's difficult to maintain that view with a straight face. As I've said before, when a business contracts with the federal government and spends money in elections, the process is already politicized. Even in the Citizens United decision legalizing corporate expenditures, 8 out of 9 justices specifically endorsed prompt disclosure of expenditures. Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote, "Disclosure permits citizens and shareholders to react to the speech of corporate entities in a proper way." This is not an onerous burden. As Justice Louis Brandeis famously said, quote, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." I want to share an example from my home state of California that illustrates the importance of disclosure. Last year, in 2010, Proposition 23 was on the ballot. It was an effort to kill the state's tough new global warming rules. The airwaves were flooded with ads, but because California requires disclosure, voters were informed. The oil companies financing the ads had to stand by them each and every time the ad aired, stating that they had paid for them. So voters were informed. They made up their minds. Prop 23 lost by 23% in November because voters knew who had paid for the ads and what and whom were behind them. It wasn't just someone skipping through a field. It was going to have an effect on them. It was disclosure. As he has a half a dozen times this year, my colleague, Tom Cole, has offered an amendment to prevent the very disclosure I'm asking us to endorse. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to reject it. Preventing transparency puts us all on the wrong side of history every time. Republicans supported disclosure before they were against it, and the record is very clear on that. So I urge those from both the other side of the aisle and my colleagues on this side. I don't believe this is a partisan issue. I believe that disclosure is good for America. It's good for our system. It is not burdensome. It is not anti-constitutional, and it's simple. The voters should know. Taxpayers should know. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back.
Mr.
Gentleman
Chairman,
from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I insist on my point of order.
Gentleman will state his point of order.
Mr. Chairman, I make a point of order against the amendment because it proposes to change existing law and constitute legislation on an appropriations bill and therefore violates Clause 2 of Rule 21. The rule states in pertinent part, an amendment to a general appropriation bill should not be in order if changing existing law. The amendment requires a new determination. I ask for a ruling from the Chair.
Does any member wish to be heard on the point of order? The Chair will rule. For the reasons stated by the Chair on February 17th, June 2nd, and July 7th, 2011, the amendment constitutes legislation in violation of Clause 2 of Rule 21. The point of order is sustained. The amendment is not in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
We have an amendment at the Chair.
Will the gentleman designate which amendment?
Yes, the Gosar-Altmaier-Gibbs amendment. '66.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 66, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona.
Pursuant to the order of the House today, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of our amendment that would defund a federal regulation, a regulation that has the force of law across the United States that is, in my view, unconstitutional and simply wrong. Currently, as a result of law passed in the 111th Congress, a person licensed by a state to carry a personal sidearm for personal defense can carry that weapon in a national park or refuge. Prior to 2009, our own federal government trampled the Second Amendment and prohibited citizens from protecting themselves in some of the most dangerous remote lands we have. The ability to carry a firearm in case of emergency is imperative. Later we learned that when Congress changed the law, the bill language omitted the Army Corps of Engineers, creating confusion and uncertainty. The Corps furthered that, who owns or manages over 11.7 million acres, including 400 lakes and river projects, 90,000 campsites, and 4,000 miles of trail. Soon after the law's passage, the Army Corps proudly declared that it would continue to ban self-defense on its lands. There is a bill pending, H.R. 1865, that seeks a long-term fix, but this amendment is a short-term fix. It defunds a federal regulation by which the Army Corps of Engineers enforces, creates, and authorizes its ban on self-defense firearms. This bipartisan amendment to the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill will clarify this confusing policy. We are simply asking that the Secretary of the Army not use any fiscal year 2012 funding to enforce a regulation that prohibits firearm possession that complies with state law or Corps projects and lands. The amendment would not, however, allow firearms in federal facilities such as Army Corps headquarters, Corps research facilities, or lock and dam buildings. This is a common-sense amendment that upholds our Constitution and gives people who use our public lands the right to defend themselves if needed. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. For what purpose is the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I would take a different tact on the issue of common sense and security. I would like to talk about the security of our nation and about our economic infrastructure and about these core regions. I understand that the gentleman's amendment is to prohibit the Corps from preventing individuals from having handguns on projects administered by the Corps. I understand it's aimed at those who obviously support the Second Amendment. I do myself. The fact is, I believe the gentleman's amendment is injurious to our national security. I do not think it is a good idea to allow individuals to walk around with guns over dams and water treatment plants that are administered by the Army Corps of Engineers. Now, I assume there are some individuals and of my colleagues who disagree with me. However, this amendment also prohibits the Corps from implementing or enforcing rules on explosives and fireworks and other weapons. I don't believe there are other members in this body who believe the Corps should not be able to stringently enforce rules on explosives at dams and water projects and treatment facilities that they have jurisdiction over. Further, what if there's danger of fire on the Corps land? Unless there is some other law that supersedes the regulations that your amendment is aimed at, the Corps employees would not be able to prevent people from launching fireworks, despite the dangers of wildfires. I strongly oppose the gentleman's amendment and would hope that he would consider withdrawing his overly broad and misguided amendments, and I would reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona.
I would like to yield Mr. Gibbs a minute and a half of time.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of the Gosar-Gibbs-Altmaier amendment to prohibit funding the Secretary of the Army to enforce a regulation that prohibits firearm possession in compliance with state law on Corps projects and lands. Earlier this year, I and Representative Altmaier from Pennsylvania, with co-sponsorship with Representative Gosar from Arizona, introduced H.R. 1865, a standalone bill that would prohibit the Secretary of the Army from enforcing any regulation that keeps an individual from possessing firearms on Army Corps of Engineers water resource development projects. Gun owners need to be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights when they are legally camping, hunting, and fishing on Army Corps property. Last Congress, this House passed National Parks language that became law to allow for guns on National Parks land, and the Army Corps of Engineers immediately issued the following release. Public Law 111-024 does not apply to Corps projects or facilities. The passage of this new law does not affect the application of Title 36 regulations. This policy preempts state regulatory framework from transporting and carrying firearms, thus invalidating concealed weapon permits and other state laws that allow law-abiding citizens to transport and carry firearms. This amendment is a bipartisan effort that would put a temporary fix to the end of the patchwork of regulations that govern different lands managed by different federal agencies. I urge all members to support the Gosar-Gibbs-Altmaier amendment, and I yield back.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Indiana.
I would be happy to yield a minute. I would be happy to, if I could ask the Chair how much time I have remaining.
You have 3 minutes remaining.
2 minutes remaining.
You have 3 minutes remaining.
3 minutes remaining. I'd be happy to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Altmaier.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman, and I rise in support of the Gosar-Altmaier-Gibbs amendment to protect the Second Amendment rights of our nation's sportsmen. The Army Corps of Engineers owns or manages more than 11 million acres of federal lands where Americans are not allowed to carry firearms for self-defense, including 90,000 campsites and thousands of miles of trails where law enforcement is scattered. Our amendment will simplify regulations for law-abiding citizens by defunding a federal regulation that bans firearms for self-defense on Army Corps lands. This will not change rules against bringing firearms into federal buildings, such as Army Corps headquarters or locks and dams. It will simply guarantee that sportsmen are able to defend themselves while they legally hunt and fish on property that the Army Corps owns and operates. To correct this problem in the long term, Mr. Gibbs and I have also introduced the Recreational Land Self-Defense Act. But this amendment is a necessary first step and is supported by the National Rifle Association and Gun Owners of America. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Chair. The Second Amendment is a key component of national security, and in that aspect, it allows citizens to carry. This is about possession of sidearms only. It does not apply to explosives or in or around structures. And I finish up by saying that I wish everybody would support this amendment and look forward to its passage. Thank you.
Gentleman reserved.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman
in
from
closing,
Indiana.
I would reiterate my strong opposition to the gentleman's amendment. We are talking about allowing people with weapons in areas where we have dams and water treatment plants, and the Army Corps of Engineers ought to be able to exercise control over those for the protection of those major economic infrastructures. I would respectfully disagree with the gentleman that he would also reduce their ability as far as regulation of people with explosives, and I think that, again, is very detrimental relative to our national security. For these reasons, again, strongly oppose the gentleman's amendment and would yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona. Gentleman from Arizona yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Cohn of Tennessee. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section: for Department of Energy, Energy Programs, Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, for the Solar Energy Program as authorized by Section 602B, 604E, 605D, 606D, and 607I5 of the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, there is hereby appropriated, and the amount otherwise provided by this act for Department of Energy, Energy Programs, Fossil Energy Research and Development is hereby reduced by $32 million.
Pursuant to the order of the House of today, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the record, there is a new version of that amendment that is at the end of the bill, insert the following. Is the clerk looking for it or attuned to the action that we are encouraged to can I get this straight? For Department of Energy, Energy Programs, Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy for the Solar Energy Program as authorized by Section 602B. Can we maybe have one brought down there? And maybe we get just so there's not a technical error.
The gentleman will suspend.
Thank you.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Cohn of Tennessee. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section: for Department of Energy, Energy Programs, Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, for the Solar Energy Program as authorized by Section 602B, 604E, 605D, 606D, and 607I5 of the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, there is hereby appropriated, and the amount otherwise provided by this act for Department of Energy, Energy Programs, Fossil Energy Research and Development is hereby reduced by $16 million and $32 million, respectively.
Pursuant to the order of the House today, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohn, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our nation is at an energy crossroads. Either we can further increase our addiction to fossil fuels and use advanced technologies to suck out every last drop of oil, coal, and natural gas that exists underneath the Earth's surface, no matter what the economic or environmental cost, or we can decide to break our addiction to fossil fuels by investing in clean, renewable energy sources that have the capacity to power our nation forever. The majority's decision to cut funding for renewable energy programs and increase spending on fossil fuels makes it clear that they haven't quite gotten off their addiction to dirty energy, but this amendment offers them an opportunity to do so. Their decision is short-sighted, will endanger American prosperity, and threaten our economic viability. To help rectify this situation, this amendment's offered to cut $32 million from the Fossil Energy Research and Development account and increase the solar energy program by $16 million, and give my friends on the other side an opportunity to let the sun shine in and join with God's wonderful source of energy. My amendment has a net impact of 0 on the budget authority and does not increase 2012 outlays. Despite the overwhelming evidence that the U.S. needs to invest more in solar and spend less on fossil fuels, the majority has decided to reduce funding for solar research and development by 37%. This severe cut is unacceptable and especially egregious since the majority has allocated an additional $32 million to the fossil fuels account, a 7% increase. This amendment that I've offered seeks to create some parity to 2011 funding by cutting the fossil fuels account back to its 2011 level and increasing the solar account by 10%. Solar is the future and fossil fuels aren't. If the majority wants to fulfill their commitment to create jobs and increase American energy security, then they need to start seriously investing in solar. Recent studies have demonstrated that investments in solar can create 3 times as many jobs as funding for traditional fossil fuels. And if the government decided to invest $1 million in solar development, that investment would create at least 17 jobs. But that same $1 million in fossil fuels would create but 5 jobs. And jobs is what the American public is interested in. The 17 jobs created would be high-paying jobs in the manufacturing and construction sectors, the kind of jobs that once were the backbone of our nation and the jobs that American people are clamoring for, giving the middle class an opportunity to have jobs and participate in the American economy. I've witnessed the power of solar in my own community, create jobs, spur economic development, and transform the lives of everyday Americans. As a result of previous federal solar investments, Sharp Solar, which is located in my district, is a burgeoning solar industry and operates a manufacturing facility that employs nearly 500 Memphians. And additional federal investments in solar will create thousands of new jobs in my district and millions of new jobs across the country, some of which will be in New Jersey. Not only is solar a superior job creator, but it's also a far better long-term investment. Fossil fuel proponents may not publicly admit it, but renewable energy will power the future. So establishing dominance in this sector is critical to our national energy security and economic security. Supplies of fossil fuels are diminishing rapidly, and their non-renewable nature makes them a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Recognizing the critical role renewable energies technologies like solar will have, nations across the world are making massive investments in clean technology so they can establish themselves as leaders and exporters of the future's energy. I recently visited Germany, and solar is everywhere. The Germans are investing and supplying many of their buildings with solar, and they are a leader, just as China is. But America is being left behind. As is demonstrated by this appropriations bill, the U.S. is not making the requisite investments in solar to compete in the emerging global marketplace. Unless the majority decides to change course and support the efforts that we've made here to make unprecedented investments in renewables, the United States will transition from importing oil from the Middle East to importing clean energy technologies from China and Europe, not what we should be aiming for. My $16 million amendment alone will not determine the course of America's energy future because we need to be investing billions in solar energy to keep up with the Chinese, the Germans, and other countries. But this zero-cost amendment will create jobs and push America a little further down the road to a clean energy economy. The amendment offers a clear signal to the American people and the world that the United States is serious about ending its addiction to fossil fuels and becoming a world leader in renewable energy sector. We shouldn't just orbit around the sun. We should harness its energy and use it to supply energy for this planet. The sun is there for a purpose other than just an anchor. I urge support for this important amendment and yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to oppose the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
His amendment would increase funding for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Solar Energy Program at the expense of fossil energy research. Our bill applied solar energy research to $97 million below fiscal year 2011 because, especially within today's budgetary constraints, we cannot afford to spend taxpayers' dollars on activities like demonstrations of proven technologies that should be funded by the private sector. but our bill preserves funding for the cutting-edge research that will advance American industry and help us lead globally. By the numbers, I can't support an amendment that adds funding back into this program. Fossil energy generates 70% of our nation's electricity, and may I add, generates, I believe, close to 55% of your state's energy, and will continue to provide the lion's share of your and our nation's energy needs well into the 21st century. The Fossil Energy Research Program receives $477 million in our bill for research that's let us squeeze more energy out of our domestic fossil energy resources. This research aims to increase the efficiency of our fossil energy plants across the nation. If we were to increase the efficiency of our fossil energy plants by just 1%, we'd increase the output of our power plants by 12 times the total output of solar power in the United States. That's without using 1 pound or 1 liter of extra fuel from the ground. I appreciate truly the gentleman's desire to move towards solar technologies, coming from a state that is a leader in that regard. And that's why we've included $166 million in our bill for that purpose. The Energy Efficiency and Renewable account has nearly $9 billion in unspent stimulus money. We've heard that before in earlier debates. And the importance of using fossil energy sources well is too great, so I can't support cutting into further fossil energy research and development. Therefore, I oppose the amendment and urge my colleagues to do likewise and reserve the balance of my time.
From Tennessee is yielded back.
I yield back as well. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee. Those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Would ask for a roll call vote, ayes and nays.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I wish to address an amendment at the chair.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available under this Act may be expended to administer or enforce the requirements of Subchapter 4 of Title 31 or Title 40 United States Code, commonly referred to as the Davis-Bacon Act, except with respect to a contract that exceeds $20 million.
Pursuant to the order of the House today, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of my amendment to H.R. 2354 that seeks to defund Title 40 U.S. Code Section 31 up to $20 million instead of the current $2,000 threshold. Right now we are in serious and prolonged economic recession. The construction industry has been hit the hardest throughout the United States. My amendment defunds the Davis-Bacon Act up to a certain amount in order to allow small businesses and small contractors the ability to compete on the smaller government contracts. This amendment will assist the small businesses that do not have the resources to compete for the larger contracts that compel compliance with all the requirements of Davis-Bacon. That is why this amendment defunds contract applications for smaller contracts under the $20 million threshold, but the larger projects are still subject to the Davis-Bacon Act. This is a temporary measure for the duration of the fiscal year in direct response to the recession. Now, on average, research establishes that federal public projects that are forced to operate under this law spend 22% more than projects not bound by this law. By eliminating the onerous costs for small projects, there will actually be more work, up to 22% more work, for the same dollar, and the smaller contractors will be able to compete for jobs that otherwise are out of their reach. Yet this agreement preserves the application for the Act for the larger projects, so that those big projects across the U.S. where larger contracts typically get the contracts in any event, these companies can be more readily comply with the provisions of the Act and have deeper pockets to handle the administrative and other requirements mandated by the Act. We also know that one study concluded that the Davis-Bacon Act will waste $10.9 billion in the year 2011. We also know that the Government Accountability Office states that this act is extremely difficult to administer, and the GAO has advocated for its repeal as far back as 1979. In a certain degree, this amendment seeks to reduce that waste. But the most important aspect of this amendment is encouraging small business participation in these government building contracts. I have stated before that we as members of Congress, we are stewards of the public treasury. We have an obligation to spend taxpayer money wisely. The government does not earn money. The government does not generate wealth. We have an obligation to spend this money wisely, and we have an obligation to help the businesses of the country, and those that build our infrastructure need our help. This amendment addresses that need. The Heritage Foundation suggests that for every $1 billion the federal construction spending supports 14,000 workers, then the savings from the suspension of the Davis-Bacon law for 1 year would support 163,000 new construction jobs. My amendment addresses this very issue and seeks to boost employment and work for small businesses and small contractors who can compete for smaller government contracts temporarily if the Davis-Bacon requirements are defunded for 1 year. I ask that you support this amendment, support small businesses, more efficient spending of our taxpayer money, spreading our limited resources, and keeping more American construction workers in a job, a livelihood, and a mission to rebuild this America together. I reserve the balance of my time.